I speak of the old Japan, because out of the ashes of the old Japan, there has risen a new Japan. Former Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Yoshida. Hello, fellow leaders, and thank you for joining me today. Today we will be discussing the culture, economy, and CQ model for the land of the rising sun, more commonly known as Japan. Japan is an island nation in the eastern Pacific Ocean. Its closest land neighbors are Russia, China, and the Koreas. The whole country makes up a great section of the Pacific Ring of Fire and is home to 111 active volcanoes, including the world-renowned Mount Fuji, which is one of the country's national icons due to its extreme height, making it one of the tallest mountains in the world. Their money is the Japanese yen, with 104 yen being worth $1 US, and according to CIA Factbook, the country's ethnic groups are made up of 98.1% Japanese, with groups of Chinese and Korean peoples being the other largest ethnic groups in the country. The first historical clues we have of civilization on the island date back to 30,000 BC, meaning this is a nation with a long and storied past, far greater than can be covered in the length of this video. During the Japanese feudal era, which only ended in 1854, the country was ruled by a rich ruling class and their hired protectors known as samurai. During this time, the country had two forms of government: a military government ruled by a shogun, which was the primary system that impacted the day-to-day lives of citizens, as well as an emperor, a cultural figurehead who was believed to have a divine right to rule. In 1854, the country was forced out of their isolationism by the United States Navy. This led to a massive shakeup of the military government to resemble a more Western body featuring a legislative, executive, and judicial branch similar to the US. They also pulled inspiration from the UK, as the head of state is referred to as the Prime Minister, who fills the role based upon a royal figure, in this case the Emperor, who largely serves in a ceremonial capacity. The Emperor's original mandate came from the first primary religion practiced within Japan known as Shinto, or the Way of the Gods. Shinto is based upon the belief that spirits and deities exist and are present throughout the natural world. If you're familiar with depictions of Japanese shrines in popular media, these are Shinto shrines. Japan is interesting because it primarily follows two religions. In addition to Shinto, Buddhism is followed just as prominently. Now, Buddhism is far more concerned with the human soul and what happens to it post-mortem than Shinto is, meaning contradictions between the two are near non-existent. This is the reason Japanese society doesn't see following both as any kind of contradiction. Japan is well known for its arts. This includes everything from beautiful brushstroke paintings, traditional wooden architecture, bountiful Japanese gardens, and classic literature such as the Tale of Genji. It's a story about the son of an emperor who was stripped of his succession rights due to the internal politics of the empire, and the life he would go on to make for himself afterwards. This story actually serves as a great example of what I'm wanting to highlight in this presentation. Japan's culture has been integral to its CQ strategy of developing its soft power across the globe. One example of this on display is the fact that Overwatch, a widely played international esport, features a Japanese character named Genji as one of its most popular main heroes. In the lore of the game, he was set to be the heir of a Japanese criminal empire, but he was not interested in that life, choosing rather to travel and see the world. While the story was adapted to fit a futuristic setting, the original book was clearly a great inspiration to not just Japanese history, but also international popular culture, as we can see. Japan has become a great economic power in addition to its cultural prominence. Economically, they are well known for being an exporter of reliable technology and automobiles. If you drive a Honda, Toyota, Lexus, Mitsubishi, Subaru, or any of the other car brands from the country, then you are driving a Japanese vehicle and in fact, partially responsible for this economic upturn. I myself drive a Honda, and this presentation was made using a computer I built myself, but with parts that mostly originated from Japan. Of course, I would be remiss to not share what it took for Japan to become this economic and cultural powerhouse, and the tragedy that led to the shift away from the country's previous cultural values. Prior to the end of World War II, Japanese culture placed a large emphasis on military might. The people prized bravery and determination in the face of the enemy, no matter what the odds of the situation were. At that time, they sought to spread their influence through military engagement rather than cultural intelligence. Because of this, surrender was considered a high form of shame for the Japanese military at the time. With that reality in mind, as World War II was drawing to a close, Japan was hit by the world's first actively used nuclear weapons. The United States made the decision to do this with the intention that it would break the incredibly strong morale of the Japanese military. And despite its devastating costs, we can see that it was successful in that endeavor. The devastation was so great that it led to the immediate surrender of the country, followed by a US occupation for 8 years thereafter. This occupation led to an increased acceptance of many Western ideals that we still see throughout the country today. This defeat caused the idea of a strong Japanese military to completely fall out of favor. The country did still seek to become a world power, though. They changed their strategy. They sought to become the first world power to accomplish this through economics and culture, rather than based on military action. This also marks a dramatic shift in the style of leadership we can observe from the country. This change in the national culture signals a shift towards adaptive leadership. Leaders in the Japanese business world reflect this leadership style as well, because decisions in these workplaces are most often made by groups of people who have studied and gathered data about the situation. They come together and use this information to decide the best course of action. This has been the way within the culture to solve issues in their own culture for decades, and now it serves them well in expanding their cultural intelligence of the nations they work with. Thank you so much for joining me today as we have taken this time to explore the shifts of the Japanese culture, economic policy, and cultural intelligence of the country. We also discussed how their adaptive leadership has helped them accomplish their goal of becoming a world power through economic power and cultural soft power. Thank you all so much for watching, and may your culture intelligence guide you in accomplishing your goals as well.